Hello, everyone. My name is Colin. I am an AI engineer with BuildShip, and I am happy to be here with our CTO, Shams. Today,
Um,
to be building an interesting AI use case that Shams recently won first place at an AI hackathon in San Francisco with. So, Shams, you want to tell us a little bit about what we are building today?
sure. Yeah, I'll first show you what I got for it so that it's, and I have an echo. Yeah. Oops, sorry.
You have the award.
Yeah, so I got this. So I did and I got this even fancier Mac Mini. And the reason for it was that we had a vibe coding hackathon. And then they wanted us not to write any code, but be able to create something that's impactful and useful within like a 4-hour period. And I was able to do it like under 3 hours. I finished and I was like, okay. And then I had to like go ask an investor. I was like, what else should I add? So, but yeah, I think it's really interesting time to be able to create so much in so little time. And then it gets to that, like be able to get feedback and get more refine your ideas faster and make it better before, like compared to before, where you have to like take weeks and months to be able to get an MVP that you can put in front of a customer. Like for me, I was able to like within the first 2 hours pull something together. I was like, okay, what should I add? And then add that. So yeah.
Great.
Um,
Yeah, I think a
I,
lot of people think of vibe coding just for front end at this point because of Bolt and Lovable and ReZero and all these great tools out there. But with BuildShip, you also can vibe code your backend. So backend engineers, it's your time to shine. So you
yeah.
want to dive into it a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I think like one thing that's like great about vibe coding is you can create the front end that I can share actually. So yeah, my screen's on. So this is the thing that I was able to create. It's fairly simple UI for now. It's just it takes a URL of a PDF deck and then a company website, and it basically the idea is to supercharge VCs to be able to analyze and research the content that they're receiving from founders, right? So just click this and then we'll go like, so basically they get something like this where there's a lot of content and then having to parse through that and like through the website. And then, so it's analyzing here, but I ran it earlier and you can see here, like it's giving you a structure, especially if you're building this for your internal use or for your customers, then you get a standard format where you can see things in a structure that's going to be familiar and repetitive. And then, yeah, so you have like different elements where, for example, you can look up funding data like status by researching and then using AI to evaluate based on the summary and the team to be able to evaluate some initial scores to give you a concept and why it came up with that analysis, and then as well as create a summary of the competitor landscape. So that's the outcome we're looking for today. We'll start from scratch and then we'll see how far we go. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So the first thing we've got to do is where we'll be adding the inputs that we want. So we'll have like the PDF URL, and then the website, right? So those are going to be our main two inputs, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually use the parallel node. So the parallel node helps us in executing things in parallel. So for example, we want to be able to scrape the URL that's coming in here, and we want to do, so if we go to inputs and then we can select website, so that's going to help us scrape the body of that website that we're calling in. And then we want to also in parallel extract the data from the PDF. So we have a PDF to text node, and we can import the URL. So same thing here, we just put in the URL. So by doing this in parallel, we don't have to wait for one to do the other, and that helps us in improving the experience that we deliver to our users.
And for people who are new to BuildShip, so this is buildship.com, low-code backend builder, and it lets you vibe code your backends. So the way that Shams is building this right now is, it kind of reminds me of how they teach kids how to code, where they show first like Lego brick to get the inputs, then you kind of add each Lego brick in the system to do something with your data output. It's like that, but for the enterprise. So it's very explainable. It's very kind of systems thinking step by step. And so you get a lot of pre-baked interactions with outside integrations, outside AIs like Perplexity, and then you can string that together to do something with your input data and get it to a structured output that you can then build into your applications.
Yeah, exactly. So now I did this. So I'm gonna go into research mode, where I want to know some information about this startup that I'm getting that deck about. So I give an instruction prompt, which is like, give me a brief on the background. I think, no, that's not the right. Sorry, I was looking for this one. I had my pre-made prompt. So given the website, I want to find that the company has raised any funding previously, right? So that's something that we want to be able to automatically research. And that, like, basically it helps you, there's two things here. So it helps you repeat tasks that you want to be able to like automate, and then also be able to build a system around your work, rather than, you know, having to ask GPT or having to set up something that like you can set up a very strict structure on like what you want to do and how you want to process it. So like we can set more things up to be able to like research. And here what I'm using is Diffbot and Perplexity, and they're kind of similar, but they're basically two different AI search engines. And here I can go in after I did the research here. I can just go into let's see what we have here. I can go into do I have any?
And all these little purple dots next to the nodes, by the way, typically you need to set up an API key for each of these services to get them set up. But we just released, I think last week, keyless nodes. So instead of having to add your own OpenAI key, you can use credits. So if you're using 7 different AIs, which are kind of common now in some of these AI workflows, you can use your BuildShip credits instead of having to go through the process of setting up an API key, maintaining a balance and credit on every single one of them. We handle
exactly. That. And that feature helped me in terms of being able to build things so fast. So instead of having to go sign up for each different one or like set up my project to have these keys, I was able to just like, I don't have keys for Perplexity and I don't have keys for Diffbot, and I was able to use the default BuildShip credits. But I do have OpenAI key, so it defaults to that, right? So we don't have to use the credits for that. And then here, what I wanted to
hide your left side, just to have a little more screen real estate.
Oh yeah, there we go.
There you go. Cool, thanks.
Yeah. So here, what I wanted to actually do is based on that. I think I wanted to. Yeah, I'll copy this prompt over. Let me actually copy this. So this is the instruction that I wanted to put. So given the two sources, combine and then return the schema JSON. So we'll go over the schema JSON thing quick soon, but first I want to put in my two sources. So here I want to put, say, source A, and then call that div post. So just by typing in, I'm able to summon that reference. So I can just do perplexity chat. And then here we can just do like, that's funding and funding. And that helps us in terms of understanding where this data is coming from, right? And then here, the interesting part is this expected JSON outcome schema. So we're able to, let me clear this out. And we can say here, this helps us in terms of creating structured data. And the reason why we want structured data is to be able to build an app. You need to have your UI know what it's gonna receive. Your front end needs to know it's gonna receive a number here that's gonna use it in an element. It's gonna need, for example, the reasoning why it thinks that funding number. So we'll show that as a disclaimer. And here we can say like have a Boolean of has funding. So this helps us in terms of rendering that on the UI. So being able to go from the generated text from the research of these two, and then structuring it into a JSON of like, this is the outcome I want, helps a lot in terms of like being able to build a useful visualization on the front end side.
Yes, my time in ChatGPT and Claude are just kind of copying back and forth between different interfaces. And so if you can make sure you have it in the exact right structure to then just be plopped right into the place you need it to go, and you're doing that task 3 times a day or 3 times a week, it really saves a lot of time, and it adds consistency to something that otherwise, like if you're using a slightly different prompt every time, it builds a repeatable system that you can trust.
Yeah. So now I want to do something similar for the parsing the actual text. So we'll use the, let me see what I did. So I'll copy this prompt over. So basically I want to convert the input text of the pitch deck into a JSON with the schema that's going to be provided, and then saying that exactly to make sure the LLM doesn't hallucinate something, and trying to enforce that structure. And then also like having a way for it to try to opt out to prevent it from hallucinating. It's like, okay, if you can't find it really, then just do this, right? So that kind of, you don't want to force someone to do something and then it's not having an option to opt out. So that kind of helps. And then here we're going to use
you're breaking them down into tiny little pieces. So you're doing like one thing at a time, and it's less token input and output, higher predictability. Like you're not relying on one massive prompt to do the whole thing.
Yeah. So to be able to, like, LLMs are always going to hallucinate. And it's been difficult to get them to be consistent in terms of like just having a bigger picture kind of thing. And that's something that we want to reduce that risk of. So I think there's a lot of value in LLMs right now, but there's the risk of the hallucination problem, and it is getting better in terms of the base model, but it's still a problem. And the only way to do that is to be able to prompt it better and try to constrain the things that is coming out. So if we look at scrape your website URL, so this will give us the content from this, and then we'll go through the deck, and then this will give us the PDF. So now I'm just referencing the output from these, right? And then for the schema, we wanna do the same thing. Let me have a look at what I have. And then this one is a little bit trickier. in terms of more complex. So let's say I want to do an array of founders. And then here I want to do, instead of the string, I want to be an array of objects. And then inside that, I want to have name and role, so that we have that. And then we'll add another item, call it summary, and we'll add another item, we'll call it mode, so that maybe like it can extract that value from the deck. And if it doesn't have it, then it can feel free to do NA, right? And then we can do like key differentiation, and you can add whatever structure that you want. So you get to decide the exact structure.
It seems like for VC or every company who's building something like this, like they're going to be looking for something a little bit different. And so they can take this template and then just say, oh, we don't really care about this, or we only care about Series A funding, or like you can really set those filters yourself. So these are very general tools that then you just need to replace some instructions or replace a node or two so that it's able to pull from your knowledge base, for example, or pull from some past examples of high performing startups that you want to kind of emulate. So it's all very customizable. It seems like we're shifting from software as a service of like one size fits all to like the Netflix moment for software, where it's software on demand. Like you just build whatever you need in the moment for your specific situation.
Exactly. And it needs to be more like always adapting. So maybe like tomorrow we need to add another field and we want to be able to change our logic. So like if we don't want key differentiation anymore and we want something else, we'll be able to do that. And that's something that BuildShip is really great for, to be able to like create a system, but also be able to maintain it and extend on it and modify it as you go, rather than having a complex flow of being like, okay, well, we built it this way, so we're going to have to stick to that, right? Which seems to happen.
And it's very visual, so you can see what's happening where. And that's something that we're working on as well, is to offer some more features. Stay tuned for Ship Week in a few weeks that help with that explainability. So that if you have that one developer who, is keeping your whole infrastructure together, this helps you get away from that as a problem, and you have much more of a collaborative workspace.
Yeah. And then like if you have a look here, so we try to make it as simple as possible, where the things that you really need for the JSON generator to work, you just have it here, but you have more options in terms of like, okay, I don't want to use this one, I want to use the new model. How much you care about the temperature in terms of like how accurate you want it to stick to the input data versus you want it to like make some assumptions. So if all these more advanced, you can control it when you hit that limit. But what we want to do is make it as visual as possible, as simple as possible, without restricting what you can do with it. And like we're able to build all of this without having to write any code, but it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do that or it's restricting you, right? So you can look at this JavaScript code, and if you want something that's more custom, you can create your own nodes, right? And you can do that by asking AI to do it, or you can do that by starting from an empty script and then coding that yourself. But as we develop the platform more and more, it becomes, even for me, becomes less and less common for me to create a node from scratch. And there's always something that already exists that I can use off the shelf. Yeah, I think so. What we'll do now, actually, we can run this. I think that would be helpful. So usually what I would recommend is always test as you build. So that kind of helps you reduce your, if you have any issues, or And so like see here, it's upset. Why is it upset? Because URL is not an object. It's not supposed to be. Do I have a string?
Should be a file type, right?
It is a file type, but it's a new feature. Let's have a look. It's the URL. I should take a URL in. I think what we could do, if it takes a file at the moment.
You can copy the node over from your pre-cooked workflow, maybe.
Have a look at that.
We can fix that later.
Yeah, I think we have two different nodes actually. I think maybe we updated it. So we have a new. I guess this one is better if you have a file rather than URL. So I'll get this one, and then this one is so we in the new node we actually combine the two, and then yeah, but we'll just stick to that one for now. And let's see, we need to update the references. So just click that, and then yeah, that's good. Let me see. So we can see here the different outputs that it was able to generate. And then let's just run it again. And here, see, we can see this schema, and then we can, if we click out, update output schema, we're able to see the actual structure. Same thing here, I think, if it's done it, hasn't done it yet.
And then we can reference those later in the workflow.
Yeah, so for example, now that I have this array of founders, I can go in and then I can use a loop and I can say founders, and it's able to get that item. And then here we can set the concurrency. So concurrency here is like how, let's say you have like 1,000 founders and you don't you have, for example, rate limiting on the LLM that you're using, and you don't want to be able to like push 1,000 requests at the same time. So you want to be able to select how many you want to go at the same time. So you don't want to go one by one because it will take forever, but you also don't want to go like all 1,000 at a time. So you have this option to like be able to specify that. So I think here I also wanted to do double research, so be able to use both models rather than like having multiple source of truths kind of helps in terms of making sure that you're not getting a single model's hallucination, right?
We also just added, we don't need to add it here, but we also just added the computer use assistant where you can call like a browser use your computer use. So you can imagine having it go off to your LinkedIn and researching these people and seeing if you have mutual connections or what types of things they're interacting with, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So as we build more nodes, you can do, and you can also like build, like anyone can build more, as we said. And then basically the idea is like being able to extend it to as much as you need. And like the use case we're building here is more of an example rather than rather than something that is like the outcome of what one should use BuildShip for. Let's see.
The proofs in the pudding. I think what really sold me on BuildShip was that we're building BuildShip on BuildShip. So most of our functionality, including the upcoming AI functionality and everything else, is all built with BuildShip workflows.
Yeah. So I think that's like all of our backend is actually all the APIs and everything that we built ourselves is using BuildShip because we want to make sure that it always works. And if it works if we can't get it to work for us, then we shouldn't expect anyone else to use it because it wouldn't, it would be difficult to be able to resonate with our users, right? So this is important that we're able to and that's why actually for me, it's keep trying to use BuildShip and just doing this, helps me try to make sure that the product's still as valuable as it can get and as usable as possible. So all of this kind of, so that helps. So we did this in parallel, and the next thing we want to do is same thing. Actually, I'll use Claude here just for fun, because we don't want to leave anyone out. So I'll just use this one. And then what do I want to use?
While you're doing that, Shem, we got a question from Stoic Mindscape in the audience. So I'm building an AI agentic chatbot that helps me query the DB using natural language. This is for non-tech people in our office. Any suggestions? Should I use RAG or which architecture? I can talk a little bit about that, and then if you want to fill in, or do you want to answer?
Yeah, so I mean, it really depends on how big that database is or where it's structured. So being able to, let's say if you're using something like Postgres, then you would be making sure that you prompt your AI to, for example, when we're using this this JSON structure, being able to say this is the query that I want to be able to set up, and giving it all the instructions in terms of this is my schema, then you're able to generate that query, then query it, then return that result. So, or for example, if you're using embedding, so if you have some content that you can't query with SQL, then you can embed that content and then when the user query comes in, you can embed the query and then try to find similarity search. And there's a few options that we support. We have a built-in database that allows you to search for do a vector query, as well as I think you can do on Superbase, you can do it on Milli-Search. So there's a lot of different solutions. I think at this time, it's kind of it depends at what level of complexity your product is at. So if you already have a database, then it's better to try to get a RAG that works with that. If you're starting from scratch and you do want to use BuildShip, then it's better to just use the built-in solution of creating a vector and then embedding it on the BuildShip database. So it really depends. Yeah.
We have some videos for that as well on our YouTube. You can check out some walkthroughs, and we just have rebuilt our RAG using BuildShip workflows. So look out for those coming soon. But for us internally as well, it kind of depends on the size of the database, how often it's changing. And then also now with things like 4.1 mini and nano coming out with 1 million input context window really cheap. There's some things that I'm using that change pretty frequently that I just give it one field of the database and say, hey, find the needle in the haystack. And then I go look at those individual rows. So I kind of use just search, just regular search.
Exactly.
So lots of different approaches based on kind of the size of your database, and it really feels like you just have to experiment with them to see which one is meets your needs and costs less.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think here actually we wanted to get, let's see, this is the difficult chat, and then like we just, here we want to do the same pattern of providing multiple sources to be able to get a realistic data set. And we, yeah, like you said, we can add other sources, like if you had a computer use agent that looks at the LinkedIn bios. So that kind of enriches your data, and then basically that informs your LLM to provide you with a better summary, right? So I think that should do it. Let's see. And then the last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to go over the output. So if we add more output, so we can say this is the JSON generator, and we should name these so we know that this is the funding, right? Funding data. And you update that, so I'll just delete it so it's clearer. This is the funding data. And then you should get this. So we'll just, so by naming these, it makes it easier to use. So this is research. This is extract. So now when we go down here, we know what exactly is what. So here we got research, and then we wanted to the parse deck. We'll get all the data from the deck. So this is the parse deck, and then we'll go research, and then we'll go through the same thing here. We'll just update it. So this is founders. So we're able to do research, founders, and then this is the Anthropic.
Just to follow up, Stoic Mindscape as we go here, as you keep building. Can we convert our database schema to vector embeddings? We are using Canvas LMS by infrastructure, by the way. The database is pretty big with a lot of joins.
Okay. I'm not really familiar with Canvas LMS. But embeddings usually work if you want like language understanding of the content. So if you have like a lot of text data and you want to know like, okay, where, like for example, if we were to create, like go through, if we are LinkedIn and we have all this data about all our users, then like everyone has their bio, then we would use vector embedding to search through the bios to get the relevant person based on their bio. But if we want to search through, who worked at BuildShip or who worked at other company, then it doesn't make sense to use a vector embedding for that use case, right? So it's kind of, it depends on the type of queries that we want to make. Do you think that answers the question?
Yeah, like you could just select which fields you want to be embedded, like Shyam said, like the language fields, and then you can kind of combine it with regular SQL-based search, where you're kind of constraining the search surface, and then you have a set of embeddings that you're searching through. But you could, whether or not Canvas LMS supports like vector search, you could take the fields you care about and create the embeddings and just store the embeddings in BuildShip, and then run a BuildShip vector search, and then just go and get the related rows once you're done in Canvas LMS.
Exactly. So if it has like a Node.js implementation or client, then you'd easily be able to do that. Right. So you'd be able to just like either generate the query, or either also you can mirror some data over. So you can keep some data on the Canvas LMS, and you can use, like, depending on your application, you can set up a scheduled daily or hourly to sync up data from a database that's like a legacy database, and you can move it across to something that you want, like you don't have to use the BuildShip database. You can use any other database that would make the data easier to handle for the AI agent to process. So here is our result. And we can see this is the final output of the flow. So we have a summary. We have the different founder fit analysis. And what we could do here is we can just take this over, and we now are ready to, so this is, I would say, like, this is pretty good for now. And like, all we have to do now is build a front end for it. And this is the thing that is like, we'll just call it, yeah, we'll call it, that's fine. We're just exposing it here, and then we can go in the, once we ship it, it's shipping, then we'll have something that's really handy. So here, if we see here, so it gives us an example of how we can call this workflow, but more interestingly, we can also, it gives us a prompt that we can use in something like V0 or Lovable. So like previously I used V0, but like now I can just go to Lovable and do the same thing, where I can just paste in, you know, and then maybe I can do something where it's like building a pitch deck analyzer, right?
I've also found if you copy the output, like just an example of one run of the output, it has a pretty good understanding of what it needs to put in.
Yeah, I think that's like, yeah, that's really, that's super valuable, because it just gives it that much context of like, so we have like this here, but that's not enough, right?
Yeah.
So it gives it like, okay, now it knows, even it knows that this is, it will pick up that this is markdown, and it would hopefully, from the first shot, that it would be able to pick that up as markdown, and then use a markdown rendering element to show that. And also it's really helpful in terms of like, you want to give your any LLM as much context as possible to be able to create the right answer. I think, like, even for me, I have a hard time in terms of like creating an email with an LLM when I don't give it all the context it needs, because it will just come up with something generic, and I'm like, why don't you give me something that's useful? Because I just didn't give it all the information that I have in my head. So this kind of super helpful to be able to give it as much information. And here we're,
Can you talk a bit about what actually happened in BuildShip? Like, you just clicked ship, and there's a lot of magic happening there that I think about having to ship an app before and like set up an API. There's just so many steps to making sure I got the right libraries installed, everything else. So like what's actually happening when you click ship that is saving all this time?
Yeah. So basically we try to optimize. I think the way to think about it is each one of these is an app. And if you think about this, it's using some npm packages. Here it's using Cheerio, which is a scraping kind of thing, and then Axios to make the API calls. And every time you test a node, it's kind of building an app. And then there is a schema of like this JSON structure of like what the flow is. And every time you build, like you test a node, you're kind of building a mini Node.js app. And then we can connect them all together. So then when we're shipping something, we're compiling all these together and then serving it for you as a backend with a URL that you can access. And here, like for example, we're using an unauthenticated request, so anyone can access it, but you can also restrict it to use your Firebase auth, or you can implement your own trigger as well, or we'll add more auth support for other providers, as well as you don't have to trigger it from a front end. You can trigger it from an email. Say like for this use case, we receive the email and we forward it to the email trigger, or we dynamically create the trigger on Gmail, which will trigger the workflow when I receive an email from a founder to say like, here's my pitch deck, right? And then be able to
trigger, and that
execute that.
Set up those kind of inboxes, like, pitches at vc.com or whatever. So anytime you get an email to that inbox, it'll automatically do this, put it into your system, qualify the lead, and then only escalate to you if it's something worth your time.
Yeah, and then and then we have like different implementations. So for example, if you have a bigger system where you're sending transactional emails to your users and you receive incoming emails back, then you can use SendGrid's inbound parser. Yeah, so there's a lot of different triggers to cover different use cases. Yeah, we have our app here. Let's see if it works. I've been using this same PDF. It's kind of like, but it's kind of, we can use another one if you have, but we'll see if this works.
We can, in the chat, we can.
We don't have it. Yeah, if anyone has a deck that they wanna us to analyze, yeah, not us, the AI will roast your deck, yeah. But basically, I think we can see here, let me make sure that we didn't break anything.
What about security and things like that? Like you said, that was an open API request, but also,
so kind of like, just to make sure, this is currently not like anyone can call this endpoint with the data and then it would use our credits and our key, but we'll remove that afterwards. But it's really simple to set up an authenticated trigger. We just don't want to go through it for this. So you see here, oh no, I think that's a bug with Lovable. It keeps refreshing. Yeah, so let me get the kind of annoying, but we'll have a look here and then we'll see the request that we got in. So we see here we got the request from, this is during the testing, and this was the request that we just ran through production externally, and it took 51 seconds, and we can see if we can like have, so like for example, this scrape URL and PDF to text, each took like, this one took 2.3 seconds and this one took 3 seconds. So, but because we're running them in parallel, in total, this step took only 3.08. Like for example, this research. Yeah, so like maybe we can move the restructure always, like for example, this step took the longest. Maybe we move it to the extract. So this is finished. Okay, so we have it here. It didn't show the founders. Where is it? So I guess that would be like something that we can ask. I can't see the founder data.
But if you're using any data from your own databases within the BuildShip workflow, like I think a lot of the feedback for V0 Bolt Lovable is a lot of your data is just kind of put out there for anybody to look at. But this is your, like BuildShip is your secure backend. So it keeps everything within the app for you. And you can have sensitive fields, you can have keys.
So currently this is the only thing that's not like, and the problem that people are having is that they would use an LLM directly on their front end. And what that does is that it exposes their own key because I can just go in and have it like, I think if I can, I'm not sure how to do it. Yeah, I'm not sharing, but if I can like look at the code, and I'll be able to see, okay, this is making a network request to OpenAI, and that's the key that it's using. But with BuildShip, all of that is abstracted away, and all the calls are being called here. And as long as you authenticate your trigger, everything else is protected. And then even if you have like a public endpoint and you want users to be able to call it without having to be authenticated, you still don't get people being able to access your API key and using it for their own use cases, right? It would still only be used for generating that, the founder, like this, parsing the deck, right? So that kind of protects your keys and protects your data from being accessed. I think this way, being able to separate the front end from the back end just by saying, here's the structure that I want you to present. And the front end is really good for taking that user input and generating, like, this is a lot better to look at than, you know, being able to look at this, even though we try to make it look prettier sometimes. So, but it's better to look at this, but it's so much better to be able to visualize what's going on into the system, especially like if you think about that it wasn't even able to show the founder data from the start versus like we already gave it everything it needs and it still skipped through not showing the founder data. Imagine the level of complexity that the LLM has to think about to be able to implement all of that. And so it's really difficult for an LLM to create this level of conceptual abstraction and maintain it. And if we ask it to, the other issue that a lot of people have with vibe coding is if you ask it for something, it starts changing other things and then you introduce new bugs. But by separating the two, then you can keep it to just the visual elements. And that's kind of easier to iterate on. And then you can keep the logic firm and strict on the backend side.
And can you talk a little bit about where you see this going in terms of adding more AI features, things like that? I mean, just maybe some teasers, but
on BuildShip?
Yeah, on the BuildShip on the back end side, like the vibe, it feels very natural to go to a front end and say, "Hey, here's what I want." Like what can we expect without
Yeah, so we're working on this new thing. Maybe this is the can show the other one.
I don't know if we will get in trouble for showing too much, but we can get away with it.
We can get away with it. But basically, this is the current. So currently we help you generate nodes, and this helps you generate nodes in terms of like, and gives it structure. That's something that we designed to be able to structure the prompt to give you the best result possible. And the thing that we're working on now is this. This is, where did it go? Are you able to see, which one do you see now?
See the VIP?
So if we click here, we're working on being able to chat with your flow, and then being able to design, to plan a workflow, and be able to create a plan. Let's say like this. It's really simplistic.
Here, it goes deeper than this, but we want to keep a little bit for the release. But follow us on X and LinkedIn and everything else, and we will show you as we go. But you can imagine being able to vibe code your backend.
Yeah, so it's still, I think being able to vibe code and then giving it feedback, it will improve a lot to be able to say like here, and then say like, I want to be able to add this step between this step and that step, and then having AI understand your flow structure and add something. And then also the core differences is, right now with vibe coding, an LLM generates all your code all the time, and it introduces a security risk a lot of the time because you don't know what the generated code is. So what we're doing at BuildShip is we try to reduce that by always relying on existing nodes, and we're always expanding our node library, and those nodes are all verified and tested to make sure that they work really well, and that kind of reduces the error rate as well as the security concern around vibe coding and LLMs generating, outdated code or invalid or vulnerable code.
And is this that you think that as LLMs improve, like we see more and more things, being able to chat with a PDF, for example, that's something that a few months ago ChatGPT couldn't do, but now it can. So it seems like the capabilities of these foundation models are improving pretty drastically. And like, how does something like BuildShip ride that wave rather than be consumed by it?
So the ChatGPT being able to understand PDFs is more around being able to do tool calling. Like if you've seen the new demo of how it can look at an image and analyze it and section the image, and be able to understand, just look at different sections. That's all about being able to use a tool to create that like abstraction. So the way for LLM to move forward, I think even if you've seen the new models, they still have difficulty with simple maths, and I think that's just fundamentally inherent problem with LLMs and the way they work. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't use them. It just means that we should use an LLM with a tool. So making sure that if you think your LLM is going to need the calculation, then it should have a calculator tool. And that's something that you can see with the popularity of MCPs and other things, where it's having that, giving power to your AI agent or LLM to be able to execute functions. And that's something that we're working towards as well, to be able to allow you to create tools, to call those, to provide those tools to your agent, rather than your agent have to make API calls directly or draft Python code on the go to be able to do something. you always pre-make those tools and provide it to your agent.
And that gives the consistency, like you said, like it might hallucinate on a math problem, but it might also hallucinate on which integrations you use at your VC or in your company.
Exactly.
So if you can build a backend that knows the types of things that you typically build with, and then give you something repeatable that you can use forever, and then slowly iterate on as new features come out, it offers you a lot of flexibility. So thanks, Shams, very much for walking us through that. Very cool to see how we can build repeatable processes like that and AI workflows. Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up for the day? If you're on YouTube, you can type in the comments or send it here.
Yeah, and then so we're able to build the whole demo basically. The only thing I did was copy the prompt over, but we did rebuild the whole thing from scratch. And yeah, I think the applications are infinite of what you can make with these things. And there's so much that you can extend it to and build around it, your specific use cases.
Yeah, for me personally, it turned me from somebody who had a lot of ideas of what I could build to somebody who could actually build them. So I know internally we're talking about building our processes with BuildShip as much as possible so that we can automate what we can, but also escalate when we need to so that we can have the human touch. Working pretty well.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, Shams, very much. Any closing words to the audience? You want to hold up your award again?
Yeah, I think it's not cheating because anyone can use BuildShip to do amazing stuff, really. So yeah.
Yeah, feel free to reach out, book a demo with us if you want us to walk through something. I'll put a cal.com link. And you can book something with me if you'd like, and we can walk through your use case and show you kind of how to get there. So looking forward to seeing what you all build. Thanks very much, Shams. Thanks, everybody.